Arctic is heating as a result of climate change, and so is the race to claim it. A scramble is underway to extract the riches now emerging from beneath Greenland's ice, a land strategically positioned between Europe and North America, making it a high-stakes frontier in the global pursuit for resources and power. To understand what's unfolding, we need to begin where the story truly starts, with the Indigenous people of Greenland who have called it home for millennia. The world's largest island is inhabited by around 57,000 people, most of them Inuit, whose ancestral ties connect them to a broader Indigenous presence that spans Alaska, Canada, Siberia, and Greenland itself. For thousands of years, the Inuit have lived in deep relationship with the land, the ice, and the waters. They developed sophisticated knowledge systems to navigate and thrive in one of the most extreme climates on Earth. But colonialism sought to fracture this connection through forced relocations, the banning of Inuit language, cultural erasure, and exploitation. Aka Liviana, a filmmaker and poet from Greenland, shares her perspective on that.
I think politically it has done a lot of things because the Danes came here in the 1721, missionary, and they wanted to make a civilization. I'm looking for a better word, but they wanted to make us civilized, right? So this development happened really fast. So and I think maybe similar to a lot of places where you have indigenous peoples, you have people from the outside saying this is the real way to live. So they started a fast development. You have to have this capitalist system now, and I think what that did is that you put people who are usually in the middle of nature and not having colonial time, in the sense that you work from 9 to 5, you follow the weather and the light. I think you take these people and put them into a society where you have to go to work all of a sudden, and your value and your value regarding to society depends on how much money you make, how good you are at reading, how good you are at this and that. So I think what happens when you take people out of the traditional ways like that in so fast is that a part of your identity, I don't know if it gets lost, but at least confused, Again, my mother, she was sent to Denmark for a year, and she was sent to become Danified. I don't know if that's the word, but more, and then she would come back more civilized, So they were sent to like this boarding school in Denmark, and they lived with Danish families, and they were taught how to live properly, right? So they could go back to and teach the rest of the Greenlandic people. And I think, and there is a lot of even wilder stories right before that. You have these, you call them experiment kids, where you basically remove them from their families and they never come back. So I think there's also definitely there. I think in some terms it's been called the lost generation, because a lot of them, never returned to their families, and when they came back here, they couldn't speak their own language anymore, so they were also excluded from society. Right now they were Danes, and in a small community, when you do that, it also creates big gaps and polarization within the communities, and they get played against each other, right? So I also think that that's what it also created, a lot of division within our own society.
Denmark formally colonized the island in the early 18th century. Although it was granted self-rule in 2009 and today has its own government, it remains part of Denmark. Copenhagen still retains control over Greenland's defense and foreign policy. And this colonial entitlement resurfaced more recently, but this time from across the Atlantic. In 2019, Donald Trump said it out loud. He wanted to buy Greenland from Denmark.
We are used to opposing, the Danish colonial system, but now Trump came, and of course his advisors must have thought, okay, the Greenlandic people are sick of the Danes, so maybe we should tap in on that narrative. But luckily, I think a lot of Greenlandic people also sees what the Americans do to their own indigenous people. So, I mean, we're not buying the narrative that we're all going to become millionaires just because we're going to become American. But of course, I think there is a division here that Trump is already saying that, oh, we want to buy it from Denmark, but Denmark is not the one to sell us because we're not for sale.
Trump referred to the idea of buying Greenland as a large real estate deal, treating the island as another business venture for the empire. And he didn't drop the idea. In 2025, he repeated his interest, but this time asserting that US ownership and control of the territory is an absolute necessity for national security. While Trump's remarks were ridiculed by many, but the idea was far from absurd. It echoed a long and ongoing history of US imperial ambition. The US has eyed Greenland for centuries. In 1867, the US Secretary of State explored purchasing the island, but Denmark refused. In 1946, President Harry Truman made another attempt, this time offering Denmark $100 million in gold through secret negotiations. Even though no sale materialized, the US found another way to entrench its influence. Under a 1951 agreement with Denmark, the US built more than 50 military installations across Greenland. The most famous of these is Thule Air Base. Located high above the Arctic Circle, Thule Air Base became a cornerstone of America's military strategy in the region. Its geographic position is critical. The shortest path for a Russian ballistic missile to strike the US passes directly over Greenland and the North Pole. Today, Thule continues to play a central role in US defense infrastructure. It hosts advanced missile warning systems, space surveillance equipment, and strategic radar capabilities. A US general even described Greenland as being absolutely critical in the effort to monitor Russian submarines' activity. But this militarization of the island comes at a huge cost. In the 50s, when the US expanded Thule Air Base, the indigenous people living there were forcibly uprooted. With no warning, families were given only days to abandon their ancestral lands to make way for anti-aircraft guns. Their homes were demolished, blankets and tents were handed out, and they were told they had no right to return. And as always with empire, they didn't just take the land, they poisoned it too. Across Greenland, the US military abandoned several sites without proper cleanup, leaving behind a toxic legacy. One of the most notorious examples is Camp Century, a covert Cold War base built beneath a glacier and powered by a nuclear reactor. The project aimed to test whether nuclear missiles could be deployed from within the ice sheet to strike the Soviet Union. But it was short-lived. After just 8 years, Camp Century was shut down. The US military removed the reactor core, but left everything else sealed in ice, assuming the Arctic cold would preserve it indefinitely. As climate change accelerates the melting of ice, what was once considered safely buried is starting to resurface. We are talking about building and radioactive materials, chemical pollutants, and diesel fuel. All of it threatening to leak into ecosystems, poison watersheds, and endanger the very communities who have long depended on this land to sustain themselves. And this is not just a local disaster. Greenland sits at the epicenter of the global climate crisis. Its vast ice sheet, once covering over 80% of the island, is rapidly disappearing. And since 1979, the Arctic has warmed nearly 4 times faster than the rest of the globe. Scientists warn that if the entire ice sheet melts, sea levels around the world could rise by more than 7 meters. The results would be catastrophic to the entire planet. Low-lying countries from Bangladesh to the Netherlands and Pacific Island nations could vanish beneath the sea. Cities like New York, Hong Kong, London, and Miami would face devastating floods. The world map would be redrawn and hundreds of millions of people displaced. And this isn't just a distant, hypothetical threat. It's happening right now. And as the ice retreats, a new colonial scramble is underway. Greenland's melting glaciers are revealing vast reserves of untapped resources. Rare earth minerals, oil, gas, and precious metals, now more accessible than ever before. Finding, extracting, and transporting them won't be easy. Only 20% of the island is ice-free, and with little infrastructure, the terrain poses logistical challenges. But in a world driven by relentless pursuit of resources, inaccessibility is merely seen as a hurdle to overcome, not a deterrent. The potential rewards are simply too great for world powers to ignore, especially that Greenland's wealth includes minerals that are vital for modern warfare and so-called green energy. They are used in everything from missile systems to batteries, wind turbines, and solar panels. Billionaires like Jeff Bezos, Michael Bloomberg, and Bill Gates are already backing mining ventures in Greenland to secure minerals essential for high-tech manufacturing. And it's not only the resources that are turning Greenland into a geopolitical hotspot. Melting glaciers are also opening new sea routes that could drastically reduce transit times and bypass traditional trade corridors like the Suez and Panama canals. In fact, between 2013 and 2023, Arctic shipping traffic increased by 37%. Now, the US, China, the EU, and Russia are all maneuvering for influence and racing to stake their claims. Russia has reopened Soviet-era bases, deployed advanced weaponry, and conducted major Arctic drills. NATO states have scaled up their own operations, ramping up military exercises and expanding infrastructure, testing new command structures, and boosting surveillance capability across the Arctic. China, though geographically distant, declared itself a near-Arctic state in 2018 and has poured billions into research stations and new shipping routes as part of its Polar Silk Road. Unsurprisingly, the climate crisis, which should have been a wake-up call to change course and rethink our relationship with the planet, has become a gateway to further colonial expansion and exploitation. Rather than addressing the roots of collapse, world powers are accelerating it, rushing to militarize the Arctic, drill and mine through melting ice, and threaten the very existence of indigenous people who have lived in balance with the land long before it became a target for empires. All while ignoring the truth staring them in the face, that the Arctic is ground zero of global environmental collapse. What happens in Greenland won't stay in Greenland.